Nobody warned him about the bill. That was the part that made it so perfectly, completely, undeniably Shohei Ohtani. He had proposed the dinner himself. That detail matters. It wasn't a team-organized event. It wasn't management's idea. It wasn't a sponsor's obligation dressed up as a celebration. It was Ohtani's idea. Pure and simple. After the Dodgers finished off the Padres in a game that had required everything from everyone, after the final out landed in the glove and the dugout erupted and the handshakes happened and the equipment was packed, it was Ohtani who looked around at his teammates and said the words that started everything. Let's eat. Not a suggestion. Not a question. A quiet, calm declaration from a man who had just helped dismantle one of the National League's most dangerous teams and apparently decided the appropriate response was a very nice dinner. The teammates looked at each other. Someone smiled. Someone else said, "You're serious?" Ohtani was already reaching for his phone. He was serious. What followed was an evening that the Dodgers roster would talk about for weeks. Not because of the food, though the food was extraordinary. Not because of the location, though the location was exactly as exclusive as you'd expect when Shohei Ohtani chooses the restaurant. But because of the moment the bill arrived. And because of the expression on Ohtani's face when it did. Mookie Betts, sitting 3 seats away, saw it happen in real time. And he has not stopped laughing about it since. The victory over the Padres had not been a simple one. These two teams carry a weight of history and rivalry that turns every series into something more than baseball. The Padres had come in with intention. With preparation. With the specific energy of a team that believes, genuinely believes, they can compete with the Dodgers at the highest level. And for stretches of the game, they proved it. There were moments when the outcome felt genuinely uncertain. When the Padres lineup created pressure that the Dodgers had to actively, carefully manage. Ohtani himself had not had a perfect game at the plate. He'd worked deep counts, drawn a walk, hit a ball hard that found a glove. The kind of game where your contribution is real but invisible to the casual eye. But the Dodgers won. They found a way, as good teams find ways, to push through the difficult moments and arrive at the final out with the lead intact. And when it was over, when the relief and satisfaction settled over the clubhouse, Ohtani felt something. The same thing he often feels after a hard-earned team victory. The desire to gather. To sit together. To eat well and let the tension of competition dissolve into something warmer and more human. So he proposed it. And no one said no to Shohei Ohtani suggesting dinner. The restaurant he chose was not the kind of place you stumble into. It was not a sports bar near the stadium. It was not a chain steakhouse with a private room in the back. It was the kind of restaurant that exists in a specific tier of Los Angeles dining. The kind where the menu doesn't have prices printed on it. The kind where the sommelier knows more about what you're drinking than you ever will. The kind where reservations are made weeks in advance by people with the right connections, and the food arrives in courses that are works of art as much as they are sustenance. Ohtani had made a call. Someone had made it happen. And by the time the group of Dodgers arrived, the private dining room was set and waiting. White tablecloths. Soft lighting. The kind of quiet that expensive restaurants cultivate deliberately, as though even the ambient noise has been curated. Some of the younger players exchanged glances when they walked in. A few reached for their phones before someone reminded them this was a private evening. They sat. They ordered. And what followed was exactly what Ohtani had intended. Conversation that had nothing to do with baseball. Laughter that came from somewhere genuine. The kind of team bonding that doesn't happen in a locker room or on a practice field. The kind that requires a table and food and enough time to let guards down completely. Ohtani sat near the center of the long table, his interpreter beside him, moving between English and Japanese in that fluid way that has become its own kind of art form. He was engaged. Attentive. Asking questions about teammates' families, their hometowns, things that had nothing to do with batting averages or pitch selections. This was the Ohtani most people never see. Not the athlete. The person at the center of a group he genuinely cares about. The courses came and went. Each one more impressive than the last. Someone ordered Wagyu. Someone else ordered a seafood dish that arrived looking like something from a museum. The wine that appeared at the table was chosen with care and cost with the kind of quiet authority that only reveals itself later. Nobody was watching the prices. That was the thing. Nobody was thinking about it. They were too busy enjoying the evening, too immersed in the rare luxury of a night without obligation, without the next game pressing down on them immediately. Ohtani had created something. A pocket of time where the Dodgers were not a baseball team managing a playoff push. They were just people sharing a meal. And it was beautiful in that specific way that only exists when someone creates it on purpose. Mookie Betts was seated down the table, close enough to observe, far enough to appreciate the full picture. He would later describe the evening as one of the best team dinners he'd ever been part of. Not because of the restaurant's prestige. Because of how alive the table felt. How present everyone was. He would also describe what happened when the bill arrived. And that description was delivered between barely contained laughter. The bill came on a small leather-bound tray. Placed quietly, discreetly, at the end of the table nearest to Ohtani. Because he had proposed the dinner. Because that is how these things work. The server set it down with the practiced subtlety of someone who has delivered expensive bills to people before and understands that the moment requires a certain dignity. Ohtani reached for it with the easy confidence of a man who has picked up checks before. Who had made the reservation, extended the invitation, chosen the restaurant. He opened it with one hand, the other resting on the table. And then something happened to his face. It didn't happen dramatically. It wasn't a gasp or a shout or a theatrical double-take. It was something quieter and therefore funnier. A slow, incremental process of comprehension working its way through his expression like weather moving across a landscape. His eyes moved across the number. Then moved across it again. His jaw didn't drop. But it softened. Just slightly. The corners of his mouth did something complicated, not quite a smile, not quite a grimace. His eyebrows rose approximately 3 millimeters. And then he was completely, utterly still for approximately 4 seconds. 4 seconds of absolute stillness from Shohei Ohtani. Which, for anyone who knows him, is its own kind of remarkable event. Betts saw it from down the table. He would later say he wasn't even looking directly at Ohtani when it happened. He caught it in his peripheral vision. The stillness. The expression. And something about that expression communicated everything without a single word being spoken. Betts leaned toward the teammate beside him. Nodded almost imperceptibly toward Ohtani. The teammate looked. Looked back at Betts. And then both of them were working very hard to keep their faces professional while their shoulders began to shake with the effort of containing laughter. Someone else noticed. Then someone else. A small, quiet chain reaction moving down the table. Until finally, one of the younger players, lacking the veteran's discipline, let out a single short laugh. And that was enough. Ohtani looked up from the bill. Made eye contact with approximately 6 people who were all in various stages of failing to look neutral. And then he said it. Not with anger. Not with embarrassment. With the specific, defeated composure of a man who understands exactly what has happened and exactly how it looks. "Shohei, are you okay?" someone asked. Then the laughter Betts had been containing for 30 seconds arrived all at once. And the room, the beautiful, expensive, perfectly curated private dining room, filled with the sound of baseball players losing their composure completely. When Betts was asked about it afterward, he could barely get through the story. He started 3 times before completing a full sentence. Each attempt collapsed into laughter before reaching its conclusion. His face, Betts finally managed. I have been in this league a long time. I have seen Shohei Ohtani do things on a baseball field that don't make sense. Things that should not be physically possible. I have watched him hit balls to places baseballs are not supposed to go. I have watched him throw pitches that break the laws of reasonable expectations. He paused. Wiped his eye. But that face when he opened that bill? That is the most human I have ever seen him look. That was not a two-way superstar sitting there. That was just a guy who did not check the menu prices before inviting 20 people to the nicest restaurant in Los Angeles. The room broke again. Betts nodded slowly, composing himself. And he paid it. Every cent, didn't say a word about it. Just closed the tray, put his card in, and handed it back to the server like he hadn't just seen a number that would make most people need to sit down. Someone asked if Ohtani seemed upset. Betts thought about it for a moment. Upset? No. Surprised? Genuinely, completely, 100% surprised. But upset? He shook his head. He looked around that table. Looked at all of us. And he smiled. A real one. And he said something to his interpreter, and then the interpreter said, in English, he says it was worth it. It was worth it. 3 words that somehow managed to contain everything essential about who Shohei Ohtani is when the cameras aren't pointed at him and the game isn't being played. He had wanted to celebrate. He had wanted to gather his teammates and create something memorable after a hard-fought victory. He had done it without calculating the cost in advance, without hedging, without half measures. And when the cost arrived on a small leather tray and turned out to be significantly more than most people spend on a month of groceries, he didn't retreat. He didn't divide it up. He didn't make it someone else's problem. He just paid it. Because that was never the point. The point was the table. The conversation. The laughter. The specific, irreplaceable feeling of a team becoming something more than a team for a few hours on a Tuesday night in Los Angeles. The bill was just a number. What happened around that table was something else entirely. And Mookie Betts, still laughing about it days later, understood that better than anyone. That's Shohei, he said finally, simply. He doesn't do anything small. Even when he's surprised. Even when his face says one thing. His actions always say something else entirely. He smiled. We're very lucky to have him. Expensive nights and all.